It's great to be here at Seattle University, a Jesuit institution. Makes me think of the current Pope, who has said a number of things about overwork and the problems of overwork and over-consuming. And so it's a great thing to be here. I want to thank our team that worked on this and has put the conference together. I wish we had more of you here, and I hope we'll have more of you as the day unfolds. But I want to thank Ritzy Ryzak and Cecile Andrews and Steve Nessich, Tricia Alec, Maureen McGregor, April Atwood, and Rachel Lewis for their work on this. I also want to thank our volunteers, and I can't name them all because some of them have come on board recently, but if you see them at the tables, they are volunteers and they are helping out. I also want to thank all the speakers who are donating their time and even their travel to be a part of this conference. So thank you so much. And to our partners, and you'll see them here, the Seattle University Center for Environmental Justice and Sustainability, the Albers School of Business, Parent Map Magazine, which you will, if you haven't gotten already, will get a bag from that will also have your schedule at a glance. Sustainable Seattle, and the Happiness Alliance, which is our fiscal sponsor, our nonprofit sponsor for the organization. And I also want to say thanks to all of you who came yesterday on our wonderful little trip to Mount Rainier for the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. About 15 of us went up, and we had a great time. The weather was terrific. We got in some good hiking, and to Governor John Kitzhaber, who I know will be with us a little bit later this morning, for his amazing talk last night. If you weren't there, you really missed a terrific talk. It's a very hard act to follow, so I'm glad I'm following it with about 12 hours in between and not following it immediately. I want to briefly give you a little bit about our history as an organization so you have some sense of where we've come from and where we hope to go. We started out in 2002, so we're about 14 years old, and we started with a bang. We had a lot of media attention initially. We had some 200 celebrations of Take Back Your Time Day on October 24th. At various colleges and in communities and so forth. And that support built. We got some financial support. We started working with organizations on various issues around paid leave, things of that sort. And we held national Take Back Your Time conferences, first in Chicago in 2004, then here in 2005, and again in 2009. We did, though, get hammered by the Great Recession. And I think many nonprofits did, and so things dried up a bit. But nonetheless, we were still working at that time on a national paid vacation bill, which was entered into Congress by Congressman Alan Grayson of Florida. This was a very modest proposal, 1 to 2 weeks of vacation. We went out and some of us, including Joe Robinson, who's here, and others, talked to some of the people in Congress about the bill. It didn't go anywhere, as you might suspect, and in fact, I had the opportunity to be on Fox News, TV News, to talk about the bill, and before I bash Fox News, which I fully intend to do, I want to say that they were the only network that even bothered to cover us. You know, for everybody else, this whole thing was not an issue at all. But I was on the Fox News show, and the host pointed. I was in a studio in Seattle, and he was in a studio in New York, of course. But he kind of points at me and says, "You want to turn America into a 21st century?" And he paused for effect. France. France. I'm like, oh my God, no, not that. You know, we're going to force everyone to appreciate good food and wine. But this was the tone of the conversation. And it is often the tone of the conversation that somehow what we are talking about, which is taken for granted in virtually every other country on earth, is somehow ludicrous. It's silly. It's a huge luxury. So we limped along as an organization until we got a pickup in 2014 from a company called Diamond Resorts International, and they were very helpful, and they infused us with some money, allowed us to develop a new website. We had a little conference last year in New York City, but Diamond ran into some problems themselves, some financial problems, and they had to drop us in March. So we're back on our own trying to figure out what the next step is for us. We've been involved in legislation here in Washington State, introduced a paid vacation bill by Representative Gail Tarleton, who will be here doing a workshop later this afternoon. And that's been introduced twice. It hasn't passed yet, but I think the interest in that is growing. So I have to say, for the 14 years of work, we sadly don't have a lot to show in terms of things we can point to for funders and say, look, this is what we have accomplished, because this is a battle, and it's a long one and a slow one, and we really are taking on here three aspects of society as part of our mission to get people to think about slowing down a little, having leisure time, devoting time to those kinds of things. So the first thing we want to do is we want to change the culture. We want to get people to take time in their lives, to slow down, to stop using the gadgets all the time, to take time for vacation if they get vacation time, and to realize just how much time matters. And I want to say that I am more than ever aware of the importance of this. Today, some of you know that today is my 70th birthday. And thank you. And so I have reached the biblical end of life. And oh, is it? And somebody told me that with me, 70 is the new 80. But in any case, I am aware, and I'm also, in my life, to be quite personal, I've been facing some serious things. I've been lucky enough that my parents have lived to be 94 years old, and they are both hurting a great deal right now. My mother doesn't have much time, so again, that makes me very aware of time. And yesterday morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning, before we were going to go on a trip to Mount Rainier, I was awakened by a phone call from my father. And I answered the phone, and he said, "John, I think I had a heart attack. What do I do?" I'm like, oh, well, call 911 right away, and then I'll call you back in a few minutes, but there's no way I can get there now, and you need to call 911 right away. Just dial 911. He didn't know what 911 was. It was amazing to me, but he did it, so that was great. And so I called back a little later, and Bothell is a suburb here of Seattle. The Bothell Fire Department answered my father's phone, and they told me that he was fine and his vital signs were fine, and they didn't think he had had a heart attack. They were pretty sure, in fact, he hadn't had a heart attack, which I thought too, because he sounded very vigorous on the phone. I thought he'd had a panic attack, and that's what they thought, and they said, he's fine, we really don't believe he needs to go to the hospital, and he doesn't want to go to the hospital, and so forth. So I talked to him again a little bit later, and the tension passed. But when these things are happening, you really do understand the value of time, and that our society, which glorifies really wealth and production and productivity more than things like community, leisure, health, and happiness, has some deeply distorted priorities. So those cultural priorities are one of the things that we're trying to change. In fact, even when we talk about something like vacation time, or when we talk about family leave, or when we talk about any of these things, we always have to frame it in an economistic frame. It's always got to be about making the economy better, growing the GDP, increasing productivity, increasing the bottom line, and it might in many cases. Some of the things we want to do are not in any way bad for business, and they might actually increase the bottom line. But the whole idea, I think, is what we struggle against. Leisure time, time for our communities, for our health, for all of those things is important in itself, and it is important for its value to the individual human being, the community, and the worker. It doesn't need a bottom line justification, and we somehow have to fight this idea that we always have to justify everything by some appeal to the economy. We're also about changing business and business values, and you heard some about that last night from April Atwood, who teaches here in the business school and had some very positive things to say about what students are now learning and what the new generation wants to do to make business a better place for people. And you will hear a lot more about that today and tomorrow. We've got some good panels and some good speakers on making this case to the business community. And finally, we're about policy change. The United States is very unique in the lack of time protections for people, not so unique, in fact, that there's only one other country in the world, Papua New Guinea, that doesn't at least require paid maternity leave when moms have a baby. There's only a handful of other countries in the entire world, 4 or 5, that don't require any paid vacation time for workers and that don't require paid sick leave for workers. So there's a lot to think about in this society. And the result of this is that we are one of the least time-balanced societies on earth. And, Bob Levine is here. He and I had the opportunity of spending some time together in Bhutan and working with Bhutan on its Gross National Happiness Index. And one of the things that Bhutan looks at is the whole question of time balance. This is one of the key issues for them in understanding what happiness is, what quality of life, what a good life is. And our Happiness Alliance, our fiscal sponsor, and I think Laura Musikansky will be with us to do a presentation somewhat later, does a survey, and you should try to take it if you haven't. Many of you probably have, but if you go to happycounts.org, you can take this 15-minute happiness survey, and it has about 10 areas of life, and you will get an immediate response about how well you're doing in each of those areas of life, and a comparison of your results to some 60,000 people around the world who have already completed this happiness survey. And what we find in the United States is that the lowest scores are in the area of time balance. The other one is confidence in government, and things like community and work satisfaction. I mean, these are the low points, but the lowest point of all is in time balance. Happiness data around the world shows some interesting things. It shows, for example, that in most countries around the world, parents are happier than non-parents. In the United States, it's precisely the opposite. Parents in the United States are less happy than people who don't have kids. And part of the reason is because they get so little support in the way of having the time to care for those children. So we have really stressed kids and really stressed parents in this country. And when we look at the data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and from UNICEF, of the world's richest countries, we find that the U.S. is right at the bottom in well-being for children, right at the bottom, 26th out of 29th in one survey, 26th out of 28 countries in one other survey, with countries like Romania, Latvia, and Lithuania being the only countries, rich countries, that do worse than we do. So it's a very interesting thing, and it's across the board. I mean, when you look at it, you see just how bad and tough life is for kids. And one of the things these studies show is that American kids are more stressed, by far, from all kinds of pressures, including schoolwork, which we'll have people talking about today, and so forth. And I was asking the question about this because we know that Americans work longer than people in these other countries. And so I was thinking, is this a fact that just that parents in the United States don't spend enough time with their kids? So I looked at the data, and the data doesn't show that at all. In fact, the data shows that American parents spend more time with their children than people in any other rich country except Australia and Austria. But what is the question? So what causes this problem of these kids feeling, having such low life satisfaction, of being the country lowest in kids feeling they're able to talk to their parents, all kinds of things. And what it really comes down to is the quality of that time is a stressed quality. Parents are spending more time with kids here, but they're spending that time running them from activity to activity to activity so that they can get in the best schools, to get the best jobs, to make the most money, and so forth. The parents' time spent with the kids is spent as chauffeurs, it's spent as spectators in those kids' activity. Kids are driven from the beginning. The Netherlands, which scores #1 in well-being for children in virtually every survey, and actually by a large margin, in the Netherlands, kids only have about 1/3 as many extracurricular activities as in this country, and parents who have a lot of time in the Netherlands, and I think Tricia Alec, who will be speaking later, will say something about that. She's worked there. Don't spend as much time with those kids as we do, but they give the kids more freedom and other things. So I'm getting close to the end of my remarks here, but I want to ask this kind of question. Last night, Governor Kitzhaber mentioned Thomas Pynchon, the author of Gravity's Rainbow, who said, if you get people asking the wrong questions, you don't have to worry about the answers. And I think he said, the big question here is let's make sure in this conference, we ask the right questions, and we do that. And so one of the questions we ask, of course, is why is it like this? Why are people working so much, so hard all the time here without a break? And one of the surveys I saw that came out recently from the Project Time Off from the American Travel Association blamed this on millennials. It sort of said these millennials have this horrible work ethic, I mean, great work ethic, but horrible if you're interested in leisure time. They're just into work, 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 work. Well, frankly, I think that's absolute nonsense. I think what the millennials are into is fear, fear, fear. I think that they understand that they come into their jobs loaded with college debt. They come into situations where their jobs are very tenuous if they have them. They have this sense that if they aren't there, if they don't show up, if they aren't doing these kind of things, they'll be the first to be laid off. And they need, because as the governor pointed out last night, people are not gaining as the economy gains, and people are not earning the wages that they need to get by. They're actually forced, he called them forced workaholics, and I think they are forced to put in these kind of hours. Millennials I know would like time off, and in fact, everybody in our country would like. We don't do this because we Americans are uniquely into work. If that were true, when Gallup surveys the country, we wouldn't get results like the results we get. Now, every day, the Gallup organization polls 1,000 Americans, and it asks them about how happy they are, and it asks them at different times of the day, different days, every day of the week, and so forth. And you know what Gallup finds? Some of you probably are pretty aware of this. You've seen the data. Gallup finds that Americans are 20% happier on weekends than they are on work days. Surprise? 30% happier on holidays than they are on work days. People want some time off, but in our economy, it's increasingly difficult for them to get that. So I think we need to stop blaming people like millennials for this issue and start changing the situation that forces them into a difficult circumstance. So there's some good news. I want to end with good news. I think it's always a good idea to end with good news and try to inspire people. Cities around the country are starting to pass legislation that requires paid sick days. Seattle was one of the first cities to do that. Actually, the first city to do it was Milwaukee, Wisconsin, until the state of Wisconsin, under Governor Walker, passed a state law saying that cities couldn't have their own laws about sick leave and stuff, and eliminated Milwaukee's law. But many cities are doing this. Some states are passing sick leave laws, and others are increasing the minimum wage, which is essential so that people don't have to work so much. They're passing things like family leave bills. California, Rhode Island, New Jersey have done that, and we'll have panels talking about family and sick leave today. in the city here, we have Nick Licata with us, who's going to speak after me. He's a state. Are you here, Nick? He is here. He's right in front of me. How could I miss you? Yeah, who's going to talk a little bit about some of these things that we got here: paid sick days and the $15 minimum wage, and really how we can be activists in all of this. And finally, our President Obama, by executive order, has increased through the Labor Department the rate at which you have, the amount at which you have to be paid in order not to get overtime, to be classified as a manager. Raised that from $24,000 a year, which is poverty wages really, that they could call you a manager and not pay you the time and a half, up to now $47,000 a year. So they have to do that. So there's that particular policy alone has helped 12 million workers. And it's not just good for their paycheck, and that it also means that companies are going to require them to work less mandatory overtime because the companies will have to pay time and a half to do that. So I want to conclude my remarks now, and again, thank you all for being here, and see we're getting a few more folks coming in. I encourage you to attend our panels and be active in the conversation. And I now want to introduce Nick Licata. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
And John, we put together a card for you, and if you want to add no names, just things that you love about John, so we'll continue this. This is for you, John.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. I appreciate this. We'll have something to eat during the break. I think there are too many candles on that. There are more than 20 candles. There are more than 20 candles on that cake. All right. I think maybe there are 80, because 70 is the new 80.
We love you, John.
All right. While they're doing that, I want to mention that I am wearing a Take Back Your Time shirt. So is Richard Hobbs. He's wearing one of our original first Take Back Your Time Day shirts from back in 2003. So if you have a chance to compliment Richard on his fashion statement, you should do that. This is my fashion statement. I want to say that this shirt was made by This shirt was made by students at the University of Central Missouri who are part of Take Back Your Time Day events there every year that Maureen Moffett puts on. Maureen will be also talking later on a panel about the things that her students do at Central Missouri, and she'll present a little bit about that to the audience, the whole audience tomorrow. So how are we? Well, thank you. Thank you. A great thanks to this. Did you write that one? I haven't heard that before. That's great. All right. Okay. Am I supposed to try to blow these out? Uh-oh. I don't have a chance. Just tell me when to go. I didn't make it.
It's good exercise.
Oh, one left.
Only one.
One left. Wow. Okay. If you ever needed a demonstration of how out of shape a 70-year-old is, you just got it right there. It took me five of those things here. So I'm sorry to say that, but anyway, I'm going to try to keep us on time a little bit because we've got a big schedule and some wonderful speakers for you this morning and this afternoon. And thank you so much, Laura Musikansky and Karen DeWile, who just did that. I am very touched and really appreciate it. And I hope you'll all have some cake at the break. Cake at the break, cake at the break. All right, you're with me.